Now, week 9, Mark 13, Matthew, Mark 13, 32 to 37. No one knows the day or the hour. Okay. Opening question here for week 9 is, how are you with surprises? Are you good at keeping them? Do you go nuts when having to wait on one? Explain. I would say I'm pretty good at holding or keeping surprises myself. My daughter, not so much. And I just realized there's a typo in this one. It says, are you God at keeping them? It should be good at keeping them. Okay, so just kind of an icebreaker opening. First question, what is the day or the hour Jesus is talking about? And this is talking about his final coming, or his second coming, and the consummation of the ages and the resurrection of the dead. Next question, who are we comparing the man who went on a journey to? We're comparing that really to Jesus as he ascends, and he will be coming back. Okay. Who are the servants? And I think we could see ourselves in that position. The deepen section, what do you think it means to be alert? And I really want you to kind of tease this out a little bit. Not alert just in like your eyes are ready and that kind of thing, but what would be the spiritual disciplines, if you will, that you'd be a part of that would show that you are alert? Would that be worship, prayer, Bible study like you're doing, those sorts of things, right? Which is really what we're looking for. We're looking for being alert by putting ourselves in proximity of Christ's gifts and his word and his sacraments. Okay. What do you think it means to be sleeping? And I would say sleeping is really kind of maybe something that we could potentially all fall into, is just a little bit of apathy towards spiritual things, and we get away from the church. Maybe it begins with not going to church or skipping church. And is skipping church a problem? And I would say, yeah, it's always a big problem. Now I understand there's days here and there that people miss for that kind of stuff, but the problem is when 1 turns into 2, turns into 3, then it's just really easy. So skipping's not a big deal as long as you realize it's just kind of an exception. But if skipping is an intentional thing, I think then you need to be a little bit worried where that might go. Okay. What gifts in the deliver section has God given to you to help you stay alert? And maybe I jumped the gun a little bit earlier. Maybe see what they think alert means. And then in this section, what we're talking about is he's given you the word, he's given you small groups, he's given you the Lord's Supper, he's given you the gift of prayer, he's given you the fellowship of believers, all sorts of things that you can use to stay alert. What type of circumstances or situations leads one to be found sleeping? Could be too much work and you're too tired by Sunday. It could be too many children's activities and putting those ahead of everything spiritual. It could be just laziness. It could lead to being found asleep. Could be from something not going the way that you'd hoped, and now you're mad, so you're kind of pouting, and it leads you to be sleepy. Okay. Next question, how is the unexpectedness of Christ's return a genuine blessing to the believer living in the world? And I think the blessing is, it ought to put us in a posture of expectancy. Since we don't know when he returns, we ought to be expectant, ready, and willing, and excited for his second coming and return, when all things will be made new, and we will be found in him with glorified bodies to live forever. Did it puzzle you as to how the Son doesn't know the time or the hour, and he is part of the Trinity? If so, does it help to consider the two natures of Christ? So this is an area where you can kind of consider the human nature of Christ versus the divine nature of Christ, and maybe hearing that passage in light of his human nature and not commingling those two. How can the gift of encouragement serve to help others in being alert? Yeah, I think encouragement to others is way more helpful than guilt trips. So encouraging others to take part in spiritual things and activities together with you is way more helpful in my mind than laying guilt trips on them. So try to be a genuine encourager to others. Okay. And now week 10, the last parable, Luke 16. 19 to 31. This is one of my favorites. Luke 16:19-31, the rich man and Lazarus. This is just a favorite one because it's so helpful for how people think about things today, how they often think about things wrongly today. This thing helps almost like a corrective parable to false ways that people see things today. Okay, so the opening question is, God loved Job and thought he was a very faithful disciple. What did it look like for Job to be loved so deeply by God? Okay, well, the devil comes into the heavenly council, and God brings up Job's name and says, hey, have you noticed my boy Job? He's faithful, he's honest, he's upright, he's righteous, he's all these good things. Now is he a sinner? Yes, but God's still very, very proud of the person that he is and the faith that he has. And so the devil just says, well, he's only faithful and upright because you've given him so much wealth and so many good things. Okay, so the devil says, let me take those things away from him, and we'll see that he'll cast you aside, God, and won't want to have anything to do with you. So God, in his permissive will, gives Satan a reign to do a certain amount of damage to Job's life. And he comes back to the council and realizes Job's been faithful, even though he's lost his children, 10 children, and his house has all been destroyed. All that's survived is his wife, and she's going to turn out to be a little bit of a nag later. So that wasn't even a good thing, it seems. Kidding. Okay. So, bottom line is, Job is highly loved by God and suffers greatly in this world as a result of the devil, but also as a result of God bringing his name up and God being proud of him. Okay, so we're trying to really equate that point, really, overall in this parable is, you can be in a right relationship with God and have bad things happen. You can be in a wrong relationship with God and have good things happen in the world. So the problem today in the world is everyone tries to draw conclusions about their relationship with God through looking at their earthly circumstances, and that might not lead to accuracy at all. Okay? Huge, 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 huge. Can't look at circumstances and draw conclusions based on what your disposition is with God. If you've been forgiven with God and received the means of grace, then you are right with God regardless of what else is going on. Okay? Spiritually speaking. Next question in the Discover. Describe the daily life of Lazarus as you hear about it. Start with waking up in the morning. So Lazarus, also notice, has a name. The rich man does not have a name. That's pretty significant. But Lazarus' day looks a certain way. He's a beggar who stays outside of a house. So really kind of have, I guess it's not fun, but really play it out. Like, what would a day look like when you wake up? What are you thinking about? What's going on? What are you hoping for? Like, what's your intention for the day? And those sorts of things. And kind of share what a day might look like from Lazarus' perspective. Then look at the rich man and go through what his day might look like. What it looks like when he gets out of bed. What his breakfast looks like. What his day looks like. What his intentions are for the day. So just kind of line both of these people up and just kind of talk about what their days would look like. Okay? And then, what does this chasm spoken of in the text seem to imply? So there's this chasm fixed between, after death, between heaven and hell, and no one can move over that chasm from hell to heaven or from heaven to hell. Okay, so the chasm seems to imply there's a permanent fixed distance or gap between those in heaven and in those in hell, to which they will never cross over after death. Okay. Deep in section, what might we learn about life on earth versus life in heaven? So we might learn, as this parable seems to imply, that life on earth could have been very tough, very difficult, very challenging, mixed with a number of setbacks, and then heaven can be absolutely perfect, right? Or we can also learn life on earth could have been very good, successful, rich, bountiful, and then you don't get to heaven, and you're in hell, which is horrible. So you had good stuff in life on earth, but for eternity won't be good. Okay? Why do circumstances on earth seem to confuse the faith of so many people? What do we forget? And I think that's because we hear things like false theologies and false gospels that say, if you have faith in Jesus and love Jesus, then everything turns out fine. So just believe in Jesus and everything will get better. We call that the prosperity gospel, which is a false gospel, right? The gospel saves sinners from sin. It doesn't promise prosperity, wealth, homes, cars, any of that kind of stuff. It promises you a life in heaven with Christ with everyone else who has died believing. Okay? And so, but I would also say circumstances are also the thing right in front of us. So that's also what we are more prone to look at and see first of all. Okay? Deliver section. The lesson isn't that disciples ought to seek to be poor like Lazarus instead of rich like the rich man. So what is the real lesson for a believer and follower of Jesus living in this world? And I would just say, if you're wealthy in the world, notice the Lazaruses around you in your life and be grateful to God that he has permitted you to have the wealth that you have. And if you're the poor man and you're struggling and like Lazarus is don't believe God's angry at you, because that might not be true at all and probably isn't true at all. And so hopefully the community of saints and believers will help you out and give you a hand up. Okay? Not a hand out, but a hand up. How might this parable help us in ministering to someone else? Well, I guess it could help us if we notice that there's a Lazarus around us. We could minister to them. Or we could evaluate our own lives and realize if we're the rich man ignoring the people around us, maybe we need to be a little bit more self-aware and kind of repent and maybe start to have eyes that look like Jesus and look for the things that he would take care of and help out with. And so, or maybe we have a friend who's really rich and maybe mean and not compassionate, but they're Christian toward poorer people, and we ought to maybe talk to them just about, hey, all that you have is a gift from the Lord. Don't think too highly of yourself, and God might give you more so that you can help others more. Okay, so maybe we need help in that way. What is so sobering about this parable, which leads to an urgency to share the gospel with others? I think the thing that gives the urgency to the gospel and wanting to share it here is when death comes upon us, and it will come upon us all unless Christ returns first, it's over. Right? There's a chasm. You're going to be in heaven for eternity or hell. That's it. And you don't know when it is you'll die. You don't know when it is that the Lord will return. But when he returns, it's also over and the chasm is fixed. Okay? So this ought to lead us to be very urgent to share the gospel. And this is why I always thought the rapture theology, which is false theology, was so dangerous, because it always seemed to imply there was a second chance for faith. And the fact of the matter is there isn't. And so we ought not to be lethargic in the church, but we ought to be getting the gospel out and hoping and praying that the Spirit uses the gospel, the word, and the sacraments to convert and give the gift of faith to people. All right? That's it. Lesson 10. Have a good day. Bye.
You provide the fire, and I'll provide the sacrifice.